Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about two basic watercolor techniques, the wet on wet and wet on dry. A wet on wet technique means you apply wet paint on a wet surface, which could be the wet paper or wet paint. And wet on dry means when you apply wet paint on a dry paper or a layer of dry paint. I'm going to use a size 6 brush to demonstrate these techniques. I'm going to dip my brush in water, run it on the side to remove any excess water, and then dip it in some color. I'm using crimson red. So I need a very light wash of this. So the color becomes lighter as you add more and more water. Now my brush is loaded with water and paint. I'm going to paint a swatch. At this point, I want to demonstrate something else. This is a question that's often asked by people, by beginner watercolor artists. How much water should my brush hold? So if you take a look at this, you can see how the color has pooled at the bottom. And if I tilt the paper, the color starts flowing backward. It means my brush was holding a lot of water. So one way of removing excess water is by drying your brush and just picking it up, or you can use the paper napkin and dab it and remove the excess water. So while the layer is still wet, I'm going to pick up some more color, a little darker, and I'm going to just dot this dark color here and there. Okay. And we're going to let this dry. After the color is dried, you'll see how the colors blend. And this is a wet on wet technique. So let's now work on the wet on dry technique. I'm going to pick up some paint, just like I did in this case, and I'm going to swatch it. Okay. And I'm going to let this dry completely. This is a wet on dry. After the paint dries, I'm going to pick up some more paint and dab on it, and that again is a wet on dry method. Now that this layer of paint is dry, I'm going to pick up some more paint and layer it on here. I'm going to paint some dots and some lines. Over here, the colors blend with each other, while here we allowed the base to dry and then applied wet paint. So the color is just going to sit there. So you can paint whatever you want, and the color is just going to sit there and stay put, and they're not going to blend. Now I want to paint two flowers using these methods. So again, I want to take a light wash of crimson red. So I want to paint a very basic shape and create an abstract flower. The paint is still wet, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of dark, and I want to just dot it here. That's all. I want to do the same thing here. I'll apply the paint once this is dry. Now I'm going to pick up some Hooker's green, and while the flower is still wet, I'm going to paint a stem. And I'm going to add a leaf. Okay. Now the leaf is wet. I'm going to again demonstrate the wet on wet. So I'm going to let the leaf be wet. Don't want the leaf to dry. I'm going to pick up a darker shade of green and this dot here and dot here. That's all. So now that my flower is dry, I'm going to use the same technique and I'll try to dot, I'll dot the dark red here. Now what happens is the color just sits because it's sitting on a dry surface, so it cannot move. So I'm going to use the paint and I'll paint an outline. Just irregular outlines. And I can add some lines here. Let me add some dots. Here. And I want to paint a leaf here. Let's paint a leaf this side, facing this side. So okay. I think my brush had a lot of water, so I can see it pooling here. I'll just reduce that a little bit. And that's it. I want to let this dry. I want to add a little bit of a darker value of red just to give it make it more interesting. So I'm going to add here, here. Add a little black in the center. Let the color dry completely and then you can add anything. You can add these margins, you can add dots or any other highlights you want. And now that the leaf is dry completely, I'm going to also add the veins to the leaf. So now you can clearly see the difference between the two methods. In this one, the colors kind of blend and they give that wispy, abstract, loose effect. While here, the colors do not blend. Instead, they sit on top of each other, and you can use this to your advantage for making your flower even more interesting by adding outlines or dots or anything that you think will make your flower pop. They're both beautiful techniques and just depends on what you are trying to paint. I usually paint loose watercolor flowers and I use this method, and I really love this method, but I also use this method sometimes to add highlights to my loose flowers. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you have any questions or would like me to create more videos like this, let me know in the comment section below. You can also subscribe to my channel or follow me on Instagram at simply.seema, where I post tutorials like this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.